Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine, I'm from Carcanet Press, and it's just gone 7, so I think we're going to get started. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your support. Thanks for showing up, supporting poetry and our publisher. We really appreciate it. Obviously we're here to launch Adam Crothers' new collection. I have just learned that his name is pronounced Crothers, so note to everybody, don't let the spelling mislead you. The Culture of My Stuff has just come out. It's his second collection. Obviously it follows his debut collection, Several Deer, which came out in 2016 and won multiple prizes. And it's still available on our website, so you should go and buy that if you haven't read it yet. So what's going to happen tonight, just so that you know, I'm going to disappear in a second. I'm going to hand over to Kylian Hughes, who is also a Carcanet poet. You can find her on our website and you can get her book. She also has a novel coming out imminently, and you can join the launch tomorrow night, I understand, on Instagram Live. So if you Google that, that sounds like it's going to be great. She's going to introduce Adam, and then Adam's going to come up and he's going to read from the new book and also show you some excerpts of the text so that you guys can read along as well. And then he and Kylian are going to have a little chat before we move on to audience questions. So I can see that some of you have found the webinar chat already, and it's really cool to see your messages coming in and stuff. So please do send us your messages, keep writing in there, let us know what you think. But also try to find the Q&A box if you can, and if you could write your questions in there for later on for Kylian to put to Adam, that would be great. Right now I'm going to give you the code and the link to buy the book on the website. I'm going to give you it in the chat. Don't worry if all of this is happening too quickly or you miss it or anything. I'll send it at the end of the event as well, and it'll also come in an email tomorrow. So check your inbox if you want to get the link and you want to buy the book with discount code. So that's in the chat for you now. So without further ado, you don't want to keep looking at me. I'm going to hand over to Kylian right about now.
Hello. I presume you can hear me okay? Yeah, I can see a yes from Adam. Hello, everyone. This is very, very cool. It is already smoother than most weddings I've ever been to. So kudos to Jazz and to Carcanet for setting up such a swish and swanky platform to celebrate something so swish and swanky, which is Adam Crothers' The Culture of My Stuff. I have a lot of vanity about the beauty of books, and this is one I am very, very proud to add several copies of to the shelf. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Adam to begin with. Probably, I'd say a lot of people in the room know Adam well. If you've had the chance to meet him, you will want to meet him again. That's for sure. So he was born in Belfast in 1984, and he works in the special collections of St. John's Library in Cambridge. And his first collection was called Several Deer, another beautiful cover. And I believe one of the first Carcanet covers to move to the new format. So that was obviously they decided the success of that means we're sticking with the new mode, setting the fashion trends at Carcanet, Adam. And his poems have been anthologized in New Poetry's 6 and in The Future Always Makes Me So Thirsty, New Poets from the North of Ireland, which was with Blackstaff Press in 2016. I once did a reading with Adam in Books Upstairs in Dublin and vowed never to read with him again, as I'd been so upstaged. But we did go to the pub afterwards, and I forgave him, but still I won't read. I won't read alongside him. He isn't a performance poet because his poems, I think, need the memory foam of the page. But he is a performer and an enlivener in general. So he's going to read for about 20 to 25 minutes, which is way too long for any other poet except for Adam. So you can try and sit back and relax. Good luck to you. After he reads, I will ask him some questions, and then I'll have a look and see in this question and answer box to see if you've offered any questions. I hope that you will. And so without further ado, here is Adam to expound on what it is the lights are tricks of.
Right. Thank you so much, Kylian. Thank you, Jasmine. It's good to be here. I'm hoping that people can now see an image of the cover of the book, and I will be scrolling through and slightly adjusting for size and reading some poems that you will be able to see on your screen. This is the first poem in the book. It's called Easter Wings. Lord, this wasn't meant to be. I think you should see the other guy. He keeps the beat and larks harmoniously. I didn't plummet, plagued from your subpar rosy ring. All it was for me was a gradual process of razoring off the frills I unrequired. Another decade, and I'll be okay with being nothing, all boxes unticked on the census, the grant proposal, the dating app. My stance is clear of adored, my mind's the gap. My thighs are limited, the two sets of footprints are from when I carried you and somebody came over to ask what was going on. I left you on the beach, an ickle squiggle. Don't you look fancy? It wouldn't be fair. Comfort's best served cold, hence I became most unthin, unthinkably. This wasn't ordained to be taken orally or at face value, but there, I've done it. And I realized when I was asked to put a PDF together for this event that I would be able to put pictures into it, and I got very excited about that. So this, because I used the word larks in that first poem, is a skylark consuming something. And this is a muntjac deer. My first collection, Several Deer, didn't actually have all that many deer poems in it, and I thought I would address that in this one. And so there's a sequence in the culture of my stuff called Damae Plures, which is an acoustically pleasing but otherwise kind of bad Latin translation of Several Deer. And I address 7 different deer over the course of these sonnets. I'm just going to read a couple of those over the course of the reading tonight. And the first one of those is called Muntjac. Scoop of green scrap in the street lamp's wee streak splash zone. Small and mossy doggish flatline. Crucifixion scenic, an asterisk of limb, a footered reference. That lane's for bike folk who yelp what the actual at the death cycle. I damn their buck eyes and go home where the values are tactile. Home where the books require many boxes. I cut off my face, which really spites it. I hole up in the culture of my stuff while Muntjac autocorrects to account. It is, I suppose, settled. The night's stick snaps beneath a beautiful frigid hoof. Faith, frighted, yields what little ground was gained. That's a zebra. Roy Campbell wrote a really good sonnet called The Zebras, to which I was introduced as an undergraduate by Graham Petchey, who supervised me for a couple of my Cambridge Tripos modules. Graham, a few years later, read a long poem of mine and said that the unit of composition for me seems to be less the line or the sentence than the riff. And when Graham died in 2016, I thought that he deserved a poem. And so I wrote him this one, which is called Riff, in memoriam Graham Petchey. Torchlights glissando along the zebra's slideshow side drifts to a discord of densening middle night, having gone too far, meaning it had gone at a point far enough. Now the beam gathers into its particular net, neither zebrafish, which, being freshwater denizens, require, it would appear, no pinch of salt in their wounds to heal them, no vinegar, nor quavers lifting from the stripe of antique zither a grifter or similar ne'er-do-well might contrive to finagle from a dealer in stringed instruments, a dealer whose strung greasy strings remained all too easy for said rascal to pull. But dexterous gestures of the dusty dust, that's the zebra's partings, serif, and a little air. The zither, primed for resale. Refrain, from refrenere, meaning to apply a bridle. It ill behooves the zebra to riffle cards, behooves it iller still to append, if I don't do it, who will, to the Nicene Creed. The unit of composition less the line or the sentence than what? The elegy's unique derivation no more or less damnable than the monosyllable my slipping from the mantelpiece high Anglican of whose, your funeral? Refrain, from refringere, meaning to break up or break open, in the manner of that merely ornamental fox knocked from the mantle that it might well have figured the roof of the world. Put together, or is it fixed, like a thought? Glue habit in a new habitat, for all I know, mouthing at a carafe of foam. Refingere, meaning to refract, in the manner of the torchlight that skews searingly, it would appear, through a hole in water, yet leaves the zebrafish almost explicably intact. And a zebrafish is a real thing, as you can see. Also a real thing is Ziggy Stardust. This was a poem that I wrote when David Bowie died. It's called Never Get Old. However hard I squint at a distant gutter, I can't pretend I'm not on a star. I'm no alligator. I don't get down amid the dirty and the true. Not to transcend constantly is all I'm trying to do, but I default to an idol, aiming for the pew, ending up the architecture's center. Bowie, low thunder, earthed himself between the fall and the rise, between the milkshakes and the milk float. It's that Americanophilic, Anglocentric quotidian against which I come off so readily as alien. My makeup's just made up. I'm acting the actor when really this has always felt real, chugging cups of nectar up with the lark, coughing up sweet peas and fat green bees. Such is eternal life and everlasting peace. These wonders never crease. At the elbows all is goose feather, goose grease, and no wind blows. No red brick alley funnels the fussing of sirens. I've chosen a lengthily happy retirement of flicking high horses at clueless gas giants, a next world away from nylons and talent. My milk teeth yielded merrily to pliers, my wisdom to a drill bit. I won such exits because I wished them. I grasp contentment, but help me with the pain, for I have desired to go and put on Ziggy Stardust again and expose what I long thought I wanted veiled, the nails I evaded and now yearn to get. Young, old, this creature fair, fighting in Belfast or anywhere, my share, my left hand pushing through sharp and sided hail or the market square. Anybody who noticed a few lifts from Hopkins's poem Heaven Haven was right to do so. And there's Hopkins. And there below Hopkins is a sea slug, which features in the next poem, although the poem isn't really about slugs. There's a prime minister in this poem, and it was David Cameron, but I think it still works. Slugs. The sky flashes. The great sea yearns. John Berryman. The slug drifts from the ocean through space. as creatures do. I take it in my grip. Others take it in the chest, I know, or as pretext. A drone moans from the featureless blue. A good sun in the stove of the sky, a pitiless, pilotless glow. The evacuated street seethes in its carpet of slugs. Glaucus Atlanticus by the gross, arsenic candles by way of memorial. The human body's a fumble of cogs less armoured than armorial, a doodle on a sandhill. The sight has the aroma of glaucoma when you sniff it. The smell of the smile of the Prime Minister is the reek of something reloading. That man is a private island. We none of us have relatives to speak of. One could do worse, is the horror. Some skirt so close to the reactor that their special feelings melt, and after a while the palmed slug can't properly hurt. Its starship navigates the suicide belt. Slug, you're the galaxy you cross and the gallows you're dragging. You needn't reciprocate my wondering what you are. It's life, friends, a glitch to which we've hitched our wagon, a wagon worn to wreckage by that blundering star. Life, friends, a swinger of birches or morning stars, counter-terror before it hatches, the human hand fully armed, a nail bomb. Sail on, silver slug. Steer by that firmamental error so glaring that verily it hinders our negotiations. The lasso of two lacerations, the heavenly outtake, takes a molehill out with a laser. The super bloopers beams are contractually binding, penned in the demotic, in the future perfect. A footnote slips in, a miserere. There isn't air enough. I slough off erythema in the aspect of a dreamer, quaff folderol and estrogen, drinking what I can't touch, the blood of the Redeemer. Slug, the gleaming pads of my fingers are you-stricken. The wrist's second hand is ticking. It elevates you to the light that is, from an angle, lifting you to me, such that you are between me and the light in this flicker-failed night, and our drought-clouded eyes swallow us until the light has nothing to see. My recollection is that that was a Syria poem originally. There's a Goldfinch, in case anyone needs cheering up. And here is a poem called Goldfinch, which is for Jack Thacker, who's a very good poet, I should mention, just to embarrass him in case he's here. Soundbite-sized memories belong not to goldfish, but to us, who are probably not goldfish. Cultish devotion to culling one tiddly square of lichen. A view not to my liking, goldfinch, nugget chicken, cocoa with notes of jam and custard, candied pine cone built out of a buzzard, says buzz off, biohazard, won't buzz me in. An angel's branding bastard rusting in Edenic rain. Of the two finches glimpsed in the garden, I can filch no vocab to farewell the gone one. This other's a bother, riffling some trees, hanging around like wind broken in cemeteries, picking pinched harmonies to a twig's first snap, startle, nut, nettle sting, snub, unsatisfied sap. I should point out to sensitive souls such as my mum that bastard is in the sense of a sword there, so as I wasn't being rude. I deliberately didn't set list any rude poems. That poem references Some Trees by John Ashbery. Several people, when Several Deer came out, including whoever it was who drew up my contract at Carcanet, referred to Several Deer as Some Deer, presumably mistakenly with John Ashbery, which is the only time that's happened. So I thought that deserved a little tribute. This is a Yoda I photographed this Yoda in the garden recently, and the famous Yoda that appears in Star Wars informed this next poem, which is called Nope. Try or try not, there is no do. Old triangle, dew soft shoe. I think that I might say achoo should Lao Tzu drop the soap. Pressure got the drop on you who fell in line at 62 with Nancy in her stockings who wouldn't weirdly cope. The Spanish fly, the Spanish flu, the Irish border, Irish stew, fake it big or shake it new, make it dazzling taupe. Summer loving happens, true. Some are born to fling the poo, some deer are trees and several Jews and one an antelope. I won't speak for the caribou who let me stay a night, a few. The boogie blames it on the booze that blames it on the dope. Frostier than empires grew the vale where rot and roses woo. I sensed the import deeply through my cockeyed telescope. Holy Father, please excuse my irremediable views. I catch your webcast bank of rue and send the Pope a grope. The petals on a wet bough blues, the currency we can't but use. Leave your hack on, Mammon, strew some slippers on the slope. Sunken in the cud that chews the inhalations of the moos, I have my fill and yet refuse the offer of a rope. Wished your moping Mary Sue, if you knew, oh, if you knew. Here it is, son, do or do not. There is no hope. This painting is a John Everett Millay painting, The Twins, Kate and Grace Hoare. It's one of my favourites, and the next poem is about it. Insofar as any of the book's poems about paintings are about the paintings, which they're not really. Not to speak of the dog, not to be difficult, not to carve ivory doves in the confines of an ivory dovecot and toss them from the god-giddily high art of the potence to feather into eggshell, gifted like a pittance. I can be your china doll. I don't believe in I Ching. I tune into the frequency of doves or divas cross-hatching, cross the wires of my purpose with the streamers of my folly. I learn the smoked glass tongues of ghosts immersively. Not to speak of their father having manufactured that from which an image stolen might be bred. Not to speak of their surname's derivation from a word meaning boundary, a word meaning white, and the nothing left between them blackness that might, should an air intrusive presume to give, thank you, Grace, all clear, Kate, the nod, insist that they will not consent, or combine, or separate. When Leonard Cohen died in 2016, I was thinking about the bit in his Isle of Wight performance where he asks everybody in the audience to light a match so that they can find one another in the darkness. And that was the week that Trump was elected, and Auden's September 1st, 1939, with its ironic points of light, was doing the rounds. And I wrote this poem, A Light for Leonard Cohen. I believe that I heard my father sing when I was 17 or so, some lines from Master Song. Severe, the sovereignty of his office boardroom. Today, I assume we die. Tomorrow, love one another. Auden's affirming flame impart the agony of and or. A sunbird, plumage bound in smoke, blinds itself for its night journey. A poem unread will regardless make good on its premise. One word, churning. You, I would love to see those matches flare. The poem, thanks for the song, Eliezer. This you will probably recognize as Harrison Ford as Richard Kimball, disguised under a beard, which of course he shaves off and quite near the beginning of The Fugitive. That was always my favourite bit of The Fugitive, because I liked that he got rid of the beard and therefore looked more like Harrison Ford. A few years ago, John Clegg was trying to put together a little anthology of poems about The Fugitive, and it didn't happen, but I did write this poem for it. Fugitive Rhyme. This is the second Star Wars related poem of the evening. Look it up, fuzzball. Han Solo seems bigger the farther he falls through the dark. I'm terrified less by the shell than the trigger, by the current more than the shark. Finger and thumb, electric razor, I'm armouring me against the former. Beware the damsel who only plays her dulcimer as a warm-up. She's perfectly not what you thought she was. Kellyanne ain't no inspector. Richard Kimball shears his fuzz and becomes a famous actor. And maybe up in the great who knows, we'll all have chins as polished as the bust of pug-nosed bellicose, or the doll of one-armed knowledge, draping a daisy chain over a barrel, installing the router of evil. Look to that heaven when Munich beer hall putsch comes to shovel. The arc of losing readers goes like this: the force, the fit, the quicksand, then the poetry bros patrolling their patronised myths. I didn't kill my wyvern, think your basilisks a goner. Everything's bots, the bathroom sinks, AI's okay, your honour. But when the chaff's chopped from my visage to chime with the minging bow, I wish I could quit that watery passage to sinking in clouds of gold. Fine, the form's transparent. Next, how tragicomically fecund, this whole that magnifies and reflects my guiltily difficult background. Daddy, a boy, mummy, a girl, conflicted and fickle and bored. I shave and I crave and feel more of the world and less of a Harrison Ford. Continuing the John Clegg theme, this one is dedicated to him. This is about Veronica Forrest Thompson and about pedal steel guitars. It's called Pedal Steel. The liquidy slide scrolls through a timeline. A birth and some stuff and a death ago across Searle Street, Veronica Forrest Thompson is buffering on the periphery, presumably via looking at it straight on. You do what you must do. Satan, your kingdom must come down. I must spend my days doing something. Which must be like looping a dolly zoom shot of a train unmoved in a station. It crosses into the room, it seems. This feels like a bad naturalization, but how could you not think about hands, fingers, feet, the there-ness of your knees? Doesn't a studied extension beyond the artwork shade back into artifice, emotion's correspondence with precision being what the cherry-faced pickers perfected? You don't lock the case and hand the keys in, having posted into history your oral factoid, not to petrify into loathsome cliché, but you persist, lonesome, on edges. My great danger is to talk about literature as if it were all poetry. It's poker, it's Ouija, it's houses and widgets. You swipe right and left. The vehicle remains in a stopping position, and yet, I also hope, though don't quite see how at the moment. The italicized portions in that are taken from a letter Veronica Forrest Thompson wrote from 14 Searle Street, and I used to live at 13 Searle Street, and so I could see her old house from my window, which was pretty great. That ends on a note of some hopelessness, and this next poem started as a breakup poem, then I realised when I'd finished it that it was a Brexit poem, and it lifts a bit from Gray's elegy, hence Gray appearing here. Of Parting Day. A farting spray, the ocean's flies, unbuttoned or untoothed, advance their shame against the ebb, the ivory and orts of meat sans feels. I sigh and stalk in high dismay my tower of dead elephants and look out on your tower of live, kilometres of wave away. diverse alarms and doves all set. I ring the bell whose neck is wrung, whose mouth is soft with Nelly dung. Kilometers of waving jet. We're born to build, we die to spill. The curfew tolling love, zip, nil. Let's do 2 more little sonnets in this set and then we'll have a chat. This is the 7th of the sequence of 7 deer poems. This chap is the Irish elk or the megaloceros. Thought he were done. Thought the Caoilinn Hughes planned grand snowcaps in the gap between us. So much depends upon her wheelbarrow that by my troth I cannot even, as if I would, could I? Person, not person, strobes distantly, gloves out to catch release. Gloves rammed at their wrists through a skull. Resonant in valleys, what hurt herds heard. Owls the trixiest, your lobe-splitting whisper. Have, please, what you need of me. Take a knee. Heed no grave shadow of an appetite that walks those hypothetical hills. For we're sorry-sated, well-read, fallow, now, having been so rudely interrupted. I'll finish with another painting poem. The book is dedicated to my partner, and the final poem in it also is. This is one of her favourite paintings, John Singer Sargent, Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose, for Roz, who's upstairs at the moment. I tender a posy of vaccination bruises, a tense neutrality of wafer, an atomic waste of forget-me-pleases. The jackdaw raises the matter of the backlog. Too much inflammation, girlfriend. Calm down's derivative. How the hue of the conventionally precious is cued to chill and dim by its core endive, which hence radiates. This little pigment races something dark to a shady bank. Seeker ye shall find ye locked in one-upmanship with dappled surrounds. Shall deepen hence, such as one might, as one up and quits, vacillating, bursting, Vauxhall for Brixton. Expound on what it is the lights are tricks of. And that's what I've got for you. So I think if I stop the screen share and Kylian appears and becomes audible, she is not yet audible. There we go, yes.
There's that desperate silence on these Zoom things, isn't it?
I'm accustomed to my poems being greeted with that sort of silence. It's absolutely fine.
You hear your reliance on your own reliance on puns when there's no, not a gentle tittering of patient friends.
Yes.
That was a brilliant reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the time and I can already see some questions coming in on the Q&A little box at the bottom. If you haven't seen that yet, everyone who's in attendance, please feel free to type some questions in there and I'll take a look at them after I've asked a few. I also just wanted to say that your name, Adam, is an excellent anagram generator. And I don't know if you've ever checked this out, but the most poetic thing that ever happened in my life was finding a book on James Merrill's bookshelf of Paul Muldoon's poems and taking them out and opening it up, and under Paul Muldoon's name it said "A dull moon up?" which is an anagram, and I found several anagrams, my favorite of which for your name is Democrat Rash. There are more flattering ones. There's cremator dash, there's marched rotas, there's demarcator chasmed rat or chasmed art or and it goes on and on. It's a rich name.
I like being thought of as a rat. Actually, I was I was born in the year of the rat, and I always found that far more interesting than being a Taurus. And there is a poem in the book that I didn't read tonight called Cambridge, which mentions having been born in the year of the rat. So I'm quite happy to be a Democrat.
Perfect, apt.
Because democracy's good when you can get it. So.
When Adam reached out to me with an early copy of the book, I really cracked out the good pencil sharpener, because I knew that I couldn't kind of dullify the book by adding anything other than really thought over words. And maybe it's useful because it's not on the full book for anyone listening. My full endorsement was, while it's tempting to despair or lash out at the lies and senselessness of the moment we're living through, Adam Crothers has turned to the culture of his stuff for the word for scrap metal. Instead of fashioning anything practical like a shield, Crothers has built a joy bomb of wit, sass, play, and Heideggerian thinginess. Crothers warns, tread softly, just because. He confesses, my mind's the gap. This book is what might happen if Paul Muldoon and Alan Gillis wrote a rap album. Buy it, bitches. So do please buy it, bitches. And that this is where the Muldoon and anagram connection came into my mind. Okay, to a question. I would like to ask if you generally tend to write about now, and if this book is about now or then.
There's an extent to which it shouldn't be about now and it should be about then being 2016. Which I feel is the year that it's most topically concerned with, in that there are Brexit poems and Trump poems and Leonard Cohen dying poems and Bowie dying poems, etc. But much of the politics of that feel depressingly familiar today. I was really hoping that the Trump and Brexit stuff in particular wouldn't fit into the book.
Yeah.
Because it would just seem dated, or that I would have to stick a date at the end of it to make it clear that I wasn't being sort of horribly retrograde, and that this was kind of a museum piece.
And were they supposed to have kind of political relevance then, or was the circumstances of the poems neither here nor there? Because with the poem, one of the poems you just read, you said, I think that was about Syria.
Yeah. It's strange because I guess that, as with the autobiographical stuff, I think the politics are all, I know that it's all in there, but I wouldn't expect anybody to notice it necessarily. And I've been wondering why that is, and why I'm reluctant to write something that is really explicitly political and about a particular issue or a particular awful person or whatever it might be. I think I'm a little bit cautious about dabbling in slogans. I feel that I can kind of do rhythm and rhyme, and we know that rhythm and rhyme, or even just brevity, can be really persuasive as slogans for good or evil. And I think that if something like Make America Great Again or Get Brexit Done is objectionable to those of us who are opposed to those positions, that sort of attitude should also be objectionable when we do that from our own point of view, and sloganeering and catchphrases and so on should be bad across the board if they are a problem. And so I try to avoid doing that, and I think that I hope that the kind of emotional and intellectual response to these issues is behind the poems and fueling them, but I want them to be something other than the merchandise of the correct political view.
Wow, yes, okay, lovely. You say you avoid it, but it almost seems as if you actively take slogans and turn them on their head.
Yeah, and I felt it was quite strange. I think it would have been wrong not to read that poem Megaloceros that includes the term "take a knee," which had just kind of entered the current parlance around the time I initially wrote that poem. And of course is behaving a little bit differently in terms of what it literally means in that poem from what it means when we generally hear it today. Yeah, I think that it's important to think about the other ways in which these phrases, whether we agree with them or not, can be applied. I think it stops them decaying into cliche. Mm-hmm. And if you're on board with a particular movement, as of course I am with the Black Lives Matter movement, mm-hmm. then you don't want the language to become invisible. You want it to maintain its weight. And if that is just slightly adapting a term like take a knee, it feels like I don't know. It's not a move that everyone's going to be behind, but I'm pretty confident about my reasons for doing it.
Yeah. And the title of the book, I believe it's taken from, or well, it's adapted from the lyrics of a Leonard Cohen song.
Yes, yeah.
And I won't quote them in case there's any, in case you have to pay. But in the song, the speaker says that he's seen the future and it is murder. I wonder what they meant.
Yeah.
Were you hoping that the kind of heaviness of the original song would kind of be imbued in the book?
I hope so. Yeah. I mean that's a very. I mean it's pretty clear because there were a few references to him even just in the poems I did tonight. I really like Leonard Cohen, and any time that I'm referencing music or other poetry or visual art that I like, I'm slightly cheekily trying to take on some of the weight of that original bit of work. Cohen was and is, remains in his work really funny. I always loved his line about being accused of being a pessimist, and he says, "Hey, I'm not a pessimist. A pessimist is someone who thinks it's going to rain, and I already feel soaked to the skin." And that's a really funny way of talking about a really serious, despairing state of mind. And yeah, I'm really happy when people think that these poems are entertaining and funny. I'm delighted if I've managed to entertain somebody for the time it takes them to read a sonnet or the entire book, and I would settle for that. But I like it when people also notice that there is some other stuff going on there, and if I didn't feel there was a problem, then I wouldn't have written a poem about whatever the subject might be.
And is it effortful for you to be so a kind of effusive and exuberant in your kind of the energy of the song of the poems when there isn't a single poem that's kind of completely kind of neutral politically?
It's I think my natural mode. I think of myself as a negative person. I think other people think I'm a positive person, and I think that actually aggressive effusiveness is something that my partner has had to deal with a lot.
Yes, I can second that. Now you don't second.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of the way I go about things, and I might be over reliant on this move, and I'm trying not to do it as much in poems I've written since finishing this second collection. But I do quite like the move of doing the joke and the serious point at the same time, being angry and flippant simultaneously. Because again, I think it's a resistance to. I talked about resistance to verbal cliche earlier. I suppose that's resistance to emotional cliche, and wanting to make sure that I and the reader are actually thinking about what the emotional response is in this particular.
That makes me kind of want to jump ahead to a different question I was going to ask you later about some potential influence of the fact that you lived in you're from Northern Ireland. There was Thomas McCarthy had reviewed your first book and called it such a mixture of irony and malaprop, of McNeese's splendour and Auden-esque knowingness that it will annoy as many readers as it thrills. He said, "I'm in the Crothers fan club, and And he said, a poet of the New Troubles era who unmistakably assembled in Ulster soil has been given a metallic spray job in some garage near the Fens. I mean, to me, because my experience of Northern Ireland was through, I lived there for, to study, and it was all poets. And so, Alan Gillis and Kieran Carson and Paul Muldoon, and I can hear all of those poets, and Sinead Morrissey, but not as much in your work, but I can hear those other poets, especially in their treatment of kind of the tin whistle in the room, as well as, the elephant in the room together. Is that something that you're conscious of, or you see any truth in?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, in terms of specific influences, Muldoon has loomed very large for me, and I could never figure out when some reviewers said about the first book that it was a little bit too much in thrall to Muldoon, and I disagreed, but I couldn't tell which of us was right. Because I spent a lot of time with Muldoon's work, and my doctoral dissertation was basically about him, and so I'm sure he's obviously snuck in there somewhere. Yeah, I think that especially living in England, not being back in Northern Ireland all that much, not having much of an accent anymore, I think I do find myself kind of grasping at the straws of those influences a bit, because that still feels like home, and I still feel more of a connection. Yeah, I can cope with people calling me British, but if someone calls me English, I get very upset about it.
But even, for example, say in someone like Carson, but also Gillis and those people, there's the combination of also their use of form. Like there's something in the form of your poetry that there seems to be kind of a bridge as well, in the sense that it's almost like anti-free verse.
Yeah. I think so. There's this sense of fireworks and just kind of let people at least enjoy the noise that you're making for a few minutes, and I'm very on board with that. I think that my concern is that otherwise you just end up having people agree with you for a bit, and what they like about your poem is that they're on side with you, that goldfinches look nice or whatever it might be. And I think that actually making sure that they are that they're getting a bit of song and dance out of it. It seems a nice approach to take, I suppose. I mean, it was very generous of you to say that you described me as a performer. I guess I want the poems to perform on the page.
Actually, yeah, and there was a question from the audience about that. From Ian Patches, and he said, I think in Keelan's introduction she felt Adam's poetry was not performance poetry and needed the presence of the word on the page. I found myself no longer following the print and instead listening to the lyrical quality of Adam's reading. I detected notes of light and shade, singing tone, choral, almost Dylan Thomas. My question is, does Adam recognise his work may come alive in performance read by himself or others?
That's a really nice question. I think a lot of people do seem to get the poems more when they hear them read out. I suppose most of the time when they hear them read out, they're read out by me. But I don't know if that's me specifically, or if it's just that the poems have an acoustic element that
I think my reason for saying for introducing it that way is because I heard you first. And I was just, it was pleasure was the number one experience, and wanting to remember the riffs that you're so good at, and wanting to remember them. And you've moved on. When I was, I kind of wanted a pen and paper to write them down. So maybe it's just a personal thing. When I came to them on the page afterwards, I was kind of grateful to be able to have more time. But absolutely, I wouldn't have bought the book if I hadn't have heard you read them. So I think it works both ways. But do you enjoy reading them, obviously?
I do enjoy reading them. I think that and I've disagreed with people about this. My feeling is that I'm just reading them the way they're written on the page. I've always described my readings as flat, but I've had people say to me, that's a lie. These are not flat readings at all. You're inflecting them in all sorts of ways. Yeah, I don't know. It's a distinction that I'm interested in. Usually, for the last couple of years, I've done readings as recitals, and where I've learned the poems off beforehand, and so that was actually something I was quite nervous about tonight, because given the technology and needing to move things around on the screen, I was doing this reading off the page. which actually I've not done for a while, and so I felt quite nervous.
I think it makes you a little bit more somber that in comparison to when you're doing recitals. That was my view.
Well, I'm just older, I think.
But this is a little bit connected. The question I wanted to ask was about the book's relationship with self-expression.
Yes. Yeah, and so yeah, again, as I mentioned, in terms of autobiographical details, I said this about the first book a lot, that pretty much everything that happened to me in my 20s is in that first book, but you couldn't get a bit of information about me outside of the bio from reading it. I think that, and this isn't meant to be kind of amazing performative self-deprecation or anything. I don't think I'm all that interesting. I think the most interesting thing about me is that I write. And so I never expect people to get on board with the idea of, oh look, Adam Crothers has had this interesting emotional experience looking at a goldfinch in the garden.
So you're talking about the removal of the I then from the book?
Yeah, in a sense, I mean, the word I appears sort of all over the place, but I don't think that it's really. The poet Anthony Madrid, who's one of my favorite contemporary poets, said about his poems and the I, it's not me, but it's not me. And yeah, I think that in order to feel a kind of impetus to write the poems, I am putting bits of myself and what's going on in my head into them. It's just that I don't really expect anybody else to care all that much about it, and so I, again, as with the politics, I try to put in some fireworks around it, so it kind of it satisfies whatever itch I was experiencing that led to writing the poem, but ideally it will satisfy people who don't know me as anything other than the body that happened to produce this work.
Right. Yeah. And there's one other question in the, I'm just going to keep an eye on the time. Okay, we've got about 6 minutes left. So if there's time for another question or two from the audience, I have a bunch of them if you don't have them. And James Womack asked, does the rhyme build the idea or the idea build the rhyme?
The rhyme builds the idea, definitely. That tends to be...
That's radical.
The rhyme tends to be the... Well, a lot of the poems, I'm trying not to write as many rhyming poems at the moment, but the books are full of rhyme. And yeah, sometimes it's a literal rhyme between two words that will spawn the rest of the poem. Other times it's the classic thing: you write a line, you write your next line, and you know you need a rhyme at the end of it, and so it affects what you say, and it stops you.
How do you feel about that?
I really like it. I think that you get into much more interesting territory. I mean, I said, I can't remember where I said this, but a while ago I said to somebody that I would really like. I'm more inclined to write a poem that begins with a statement I disagree with, and that then uses the form to batter away at that statement and figure out the extent to which I am actually on side, or the terms in which the initial statement was phrased were not correct. And I love that this little machine of form will do that sort of work with a thought, because again, given that I'm not really looking to express myself directly to people, because if I wanted to do that I wouldn't write a poem. It's really great actually to see my own positions or other people's positions on particular issues challenged by this huge tradition of sonnets and or rhyme and or meter or whatever.
Yeah. There was a beautiful piece about your work by Susanna Dickey, and there's a couple of things that I've written about it. So let me see which one. So I'll ask, she says, if the reader is left wondering how many layers of meaning went just nudged at or undisturbed entirely. And she talks about the book's scrubbed raw cynicism. and she gives the examples of the lines, another decade and I'll be okay with being nothing. This moment's owed no monument, which deserves a monument as a line. And I'm wondering, and asking for a friend, whether one's ironizing compulsion can get out of control or can start to get in the way.
I think it can. I think I actually got it more under control for this book than it was in the first book. A couple of people described the first book. John McAuliffe, in a really nice review, said that the poems occasionally short-circuited themselves with their irony, and there is the risk that in trying not to say a single thing directly, you end up just achieving absolutely nothing.
I don't fear that that's what happened. I'm curious as to whether that's something that you found yourself toying with or nudging up against the lines with, you know, whether you were conscious of the extent to which a reader was going to be desperate for clinging on to meaning. Obviously, part of the narrative of the book seems to be making fun of our you know, obsession with meaning in a state of meaninglessness.
I think I was thinking about that, and I was trying to reconcile that kind of cynicism, as Susie put it, or skepticism, I guess one could also say, which it comes at it from a slightly different angle. Trying to reconcile that with the fact that, you know, I am still writing a book of poems. I am still trying to make something beautiful that ideally people will consider worth, you know, 10 quid and a couple of hours of their time. And I think that, you know, people's mileage may vary, but I think that some interesting things came out of the wrestling match between those two particular angels, or more likely demons.
Because the line, not to transcend constantly is all I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I think that's me thinking about, probably thinking about Philip Larkin, who is not a very fashionable person to be on board with, but I really like Larkin's distrust of the kind of easy, transcendent, poetic moment. Because if you write poems for a while, you can sort of do it. You can end a poem with a word like bone or heart or you, and you get this little. I think he described it as the moment of liftoff or the moment of uplift, and I think that is what we are entirely reasonably striving for, and it's something that you want from your art, but you want to make sure it's not a cheap trick, and that you're earning it.
Absolutely, yeah. My partner is a climate scientist, and unfortunately, every single question answers, you know, every single endpoint is, and can you give us something, you know, to give us a little, you know, kick in our step? And you just think, well, if you're contriving that, that's pretty grim. And it's true for the poem as well, that it's grim if it's contrived, that effect.
Yeah.
And we are out of time. If there's one more audience questions, I'll ask. But just while someone's in the moment of doing that, maybe it's best to just ask, what are you working on now?
Right, there are two poetry collections that I have in mind. One of them is of slightly more stripped down and sincere lyrics than I've done in the first couple of books, coupled with big wacky prose poems. And the other is a book of 2 or 3 long narrative poems, kind of informed by science fiction and horror and stuff like that. Those are sort of bubbling away in the background. The thing I'm most excited about at the minute is attempting to write a novel, which is in no way the sort of novel one I would imagine one would expect from having read my poems. Basically, well, I want to write a big wacky space opera.
Cool.
And so that's what I'm working on. Speaking of novels, is yours going to be available from just the one good bookshop or from all good bookshops?
Oh, from all, yeah. From bookshops, hopefully. except
Yes.
for the ones that have blacklisted me for being too much of a creep with the last book, and you know, signing copies, and so they couldn't send them back. But yes, a big cheers to celebrate this wonderful book. It's absolutely unique, and I will be pushing it on many friends. So huge congrats, Adam, and thank you to everybody for being with us and celebrating. And maybe Jazz can join me in doing a little.
Very much, everybody. Thank you.
Please do buy Adam's wonderful book.
Yay.
Yay.
Hi, yes, hi again. Thank you so much, you two. It was such a wonderful reading, Adam, and really great discussion. Thank you, Kylian, and thank you, Adam. I did sort of think that you were going to read us another poem.
I can do. I'm aware that obviously people won't be being rude if they want to leave because it is after 8 o'clock. But I can read one more poem from the book to sort of cauterize the evening.
I think it would be nice to hear one more. Thank you. Yeah.
Marvelous. I shall share a screen. There we are. Right. Thank you, everybody, so much. I really appreciate this. And it's so nice to see comments in the chat as well. This is a screenshot from Lord's video for Green Light, which informed this poem, which is the penultimate poem in the book. It follows a prose poem that ends with the line, "Poetry is language slowed down to make it harder to understand." And I thought I would write something that exemplified it, but which was also inspired by Lord. The best poem. A run of outlines, like the zoo in a snake. Like whatever silhouette etiquette suggests is best is. Rained offcuts, shadows, balk. Here's my glockenspiel. Herewith seafowl politely hailed. I message them from the core of my crumbled abode in the dark green dark. I want light green light. I've misread turns of address. Editing's the art, part desperation, largely excising dedications. Words flail, feedback slips, yellow faxes reminisce, secure skies sound clouds. Louder than actions, the speck to which the dreck has declined. From the submarine to the meticulous, to the handed baton, from the thumb war, the sketch in flame and nail, dream vacation. Traumatic day trip, the consistency of tone is bad for wading, no question of evading what moves with such suddenness. No sense engaging what moves with such certainty. I seen a corpse fly abrade a city-wide hull with greater efficacy. Goodness atrophies in a harness. The honest sympathies vibrate is what I've convinced myself. I have prior convictions. Not funny tra-la, attacks return, cues are flubbed, hubbub when the clash registers, spending out loud like funny pecunious. Earth has nothing to chauffeur it. Throw a Grecian urn or two. I miss you happens in the breast of folk. The rest is counterpart. Counterpoint. Finger paints, having writ toes lies of least resilience into the great white's open submission. Prophetic? Nah. No aesthetic but autobiographical aesthenics. Confessional hypotheses, sunset in foam, row, boys, row. It does not adhere. 60 sexts per second, sir. My strobing punches, le penseur. Taylor tinkers with solder. Sodage's nice. The sonar's so good, my heel taps to what enwraps the vessel. Beep, click, this beat is sick. It must die. Lord, have mercy upon us.
Thank you so much. What a perfect poem to end on. This has been a really, really great evening. Congratulations to you and your new book, Adam. Everybody, please do buy the book. You all get £2 off, and I'm putting it in the chat now. And you'll get it in an email tomorrow, so don't worry if you can't do it right now, but definitely buy it. Like, that was so worth it. Please join us for our next launch. It's on the 28th of June. We're having Sunday afternoon poems, which is a bit of a change, to celebrate Theophilus Queck's new book. So he'll be streaming in from Singapore. So that's why it's on a Sunday afternoon, because it'll be 9 p.m. for him. So hopefully he's not tired. But I think that'll be really great. This has been really great. So thank you to Adam, and thank you, Kylian. It's been wonderful. And thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone. Bye.